The Chicago Bulls got themselves a victory last night over the Portland Trail Blazers. But one of the stories that probably is coming out of that game is Julian Philips. But the thing is, can the Chicago Bulls find more minutes for Julian Philips? And then we look ahead to the next 10 games for the Chicago Bulls with some games that might be very, very winnable to see if they can continue to make a push in the right direction. Y'all know we're going to talk about it, break it down. But you gotta hear the music first.
Cognac, gang.
Shy Boys Podcast with the Cognac Boys. I'm Cognac Boy Bobby, and I'm holding it down on today's episode of Shy Boys Podcast. If you're tuning in with me today, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell as well. Last night, your Chicago Bulls got a 104-96 victory over the Portland Trail Blazers. The Chicago Bulls are now 3 games under 500, and they are trying to make a way so they can get to 500 and hopefully be over 500 within these next few games. But yesterday, I really want to, from watching the game yesterday, last night, I really want to talk about Julian Philips on today's episode because I feel like this is a young player who obviously deserves some time, but we know is really, really difficult, especially when you're considering all the players on the Bulls team and the way that Billy Donovan likes to operate. It's definitely something that's going to be very, very challenging to see if the Bulls can find Julian Philips some minutes. But last night, with giving more opportunity, Julian Philips, with 23 minutes, he performed pretty damn well. You know what I'm saying? Went 4 for 7 from the field, 1 for 3 from the three-point line, even went 2 or 4 from the free throw line, ended the game with a +4 plus minus, and had 11 points, 2 rebounds, 1 steal, and 1 major block. Oh my God, it was so crazy. Gotta love it though. But the reason I think that the Bulls need to figure it out is because the way that Julian Philips is, the type of player that he is, a very, very versatile player with how you can utilize him. To me, I like to look at him in a sense of like a Derrick Jones Jr., but a little bit more size and a little bit more athleticism. You know what I'm saying? It's close, but the athleticism is there. And I think that this guy's a player, with the height and all the things that he's able to do, he's a player that you can really, really utilize in multiple lineups, utilize against different teams. If you want to go small, he can be out there. If you want to play big, he can be out there. Stacey King mentioned it. Coach Billy Donovan mentioned it after the game, that Julian Philips is a smart basketball player, and he is a guy who knows where he needs to be, and he plays within himself. I know, we like to talk about a lot of players around, on the Chicago Bulls team. But I think that if we looking at one of our own and you can compare him to Julian Philips, if you look at Dalen Terry in the way that he was so erratic last year, you know what I'm saying? You look at that Julian Philips and be like, he's a bit different. You know what I'm saying? He looks a little bit more calmer. You know what I'm saying? He looks a little bit more comfortable in the game, at least early on when you compare Dalen Terry's early start and Julian Philips' early start to his career. So I think that Julian Philips being a smart player, being able to calm down, being able to provide you things offensively and defensively, he's somebody that you might have to try to find minutes for. You know what I'm saying? Because on the offensive side, this guy, you know what I'm saying, didn't go too crazy from the three-point line yesterday. He went 1 for 3, but he's a very, very capable shooter from the perimeter. I believe he's does a pretty good job attacking the basket. And then when the ball is not in his hands, he knows how to fill those voids or get to those spots, better than most, you know what I'm saying, from what we've seen from young guys. You know what I'm saying? So that's a guy that you absolutely have to see if you can find minutes for. But then that comes in with the challenge. The challenge is, who do you take minutes from? Who do you take minutes from? Because Patrick Williams will be eventually set to return from injury. Zach LaVine, if he's not traded by the deadline, I guess in another week, you know what I'm saying, he's going to have some minutes. And it's only so minutes that can go out. It's only so many minutes that can go out to the players. And then you don't want to honestly, you don't want to stunt the growth of Dalen Terry either. You know what I'm saying? Because Dalen Terry this season, he's been all right. And then he's been much better than most nights. You know what I'm saying? Than when we seen him last year. So that's where the challenge comes in, that or seeing who do you take from? Do you take from Javon Carter? Since I think that's probably one of the routes that you can go. Like if you're thinking about it, because Kobe White is your starter, so you got guys that can come in and back him up. That could be the Ayodo Sumus of the world. That could be the Alice Caruso who can come in and handle the ball a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Javon Carter is that guy that can handle the ball. He comes in with that veteran experience, solid on defense on most nights, up and down a little bit on from the 3-point on most nights, but he still gives you that veteran presence that teams like to go with. And in our head coach, he loves his veteran players. You know what I'm saying? And it always goes to those opportunities. You know what I'm saying? When you get these opportunities, you have to make the most of them to where Billy Donovan begins to trust you. Because if Billy Donovan doesn't trust you much, you will see 23 minutes last night from Julian Philips. But if he comes out in his next game against Toronto and, you know what I'm saying, he's having a bad first few minutes, Billy Donovan will put his ass right back on the bench. It's just what it is. So right now, Julian Philips has to work his way up to building that trust between him and head coach Billy Donovan. And then once he gets those opportunities, it doesn't always have to come in points, ladies and gentlemen. Let's make that clear. It doesn't have to always end the game in 11 points. But if Julian Phillips can come out here, let's say he get 3 assists on, if he goes and plays 15 minutes, he gets you 3 assists, about 4 or 5 rebounds, a block of steal here or there. That's impactful stuff. Billy Donovan won't be able to ignore that, just like he wasn't able to ignore that huge block that Julian Phillips had last night, the 2-hand volleyball swat. It was crazy. So it's a lot of things. I just think that as this young guy continues to develop, you know what I'm saying, he's going to have to build that trust between him and his coaching staff. And I think that's the biggest thing. I'm always somebody who says give the young guys an opportunity, but at the same time, I know who I'm dealing with as a head coach. I know who I'm dealing with as a guy who, you know what I'm saying, who will give his young guy some time, but it's always on a short leash. And I respect it to an extent, because if you're going to be in this game, we professionals, you got to be ready to go. And when I count on you, you got to be able to give me something productive so I can look at and say, hey, this guy, he does or does not deserve more minutes. So it's going to be all in the hands of Julian Phillips. I believe this young guy has a lot of talent. I want the Chicago Bulls to continue to hone in on those talents and just see and give him opportunity so we can continue to build this thing out for the future. Because if we keeping it a buck, before we move on to the last topic of the day, if we keeping it a buck, the Bulls got a lot of nice young players that we know what they are for the most part. And then you got some you want to see a little bit more of so we can get a clearer idea of what they can be. Those guys include Kobe White, Ayodo Sumu, Julian Phillips, Patrick Williams, and Dalen Terry. That's 5 young players currently on the team, with the team most of the time, that you can depend on and get something out of. That's 5 young players. Keep in mind that the most of the time Billy Donovan ain't running no crazy, rotations. It's about 9 to 10 player rotations depending on the matchup in the game. So that's half of the squad. That's half of the guys that's getting most of the minutes. You know what I'm saying? So you look at that and you say, hey, the Bulls might be in good hands. Obviously, there's still a bunch of growing that we have to do as an organization and a team, but the young pups, they here. So that's all that matter. Now, before we go, I want to just give you guys a quick look into the Chicago Bulls upcoming schedule, because I think that it's a favorable schedule. You looking at it, I know we don't like to get ahead of ourselves too much, but you still have to look at it and see what's ahead of you, to where the Chicago Bulls can hopefully, make a push to get it over 500. You know what I'm saying? Because we've been under 500, we've gotten close and then get knocked right back down. But the next few games, there's going to be some challenging ones that's up in there, but the Bulls can compete with a lot of these teams. You got the Toronto Raptors on Tuesday, then the Bulls go to Charlotte on the 31st. And then Sacramento, that's a tough one. Minnesota, that's a tough one. Memphis, they got some challenges down there, but the Bulls should be all right. Then you got Orlando, Atlanta, Cleveland, and Boston as those next few games coming up for the next few weeks. And we just gotta wait and see what happens, man. That's what it really comes down to. But I think the Bulls should be in good hands, at least moving down. And if they play team basketball, be able to be effective on the defensive side. Who knows what can happen? But I know these next two games should be good ramp-up games to where when the Bulls start facing the Sacramentos and the Minnesota Timberwolves of the world, they should be all right. So we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully they can end that little stretch on a positive note, and we can see something very productive come out from our Bulls, because that's all we ask for. That's all we really ask for, is just to these guys to come out here and compete, be competitive right now. And you never know what can happen. You never know what can happen, because this is the NBA, baby. And I know All-Star break is approaching. I know trade deadline is approaching, with a lot of things to talk about, especially Zach LaVine and other players and surprise players that might come out, things like that. Right now, the Bulls sit in the 9th seed, 2.5 games out of the 8th seed. So they gotta put some wins on the board. In that Orlando Magic's game that's gonna be coming up in a couple weeks, that's gonna be a big game, especially for seeded and positioning, so you can at least get out of the 9th seed, bro. You gotta get out of the 9th seed. But they got some challenges, man. They got some challenges. They gotta hit the ground running though. And yeah, we'll see what happens, man. But that's it for me today. Thank y'all so much for tuning in and watching Shy Bulls podcast this morning. Make sure if you're tuned in, you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Make sure if you want to call in and be a part of the mailbag episodes, you call our line 773-242-9219. This is another episode of Shy Bulls podcast. I'm Bobby. I'm gonna catch y'all on the next one for sure.
Cognac. Gang.